Welcome to the Value Vault, where today we're diving into a world that most people walk past every single day without realizing they could be stepping over a fortune that would change their lives forever. And we're starting with a coin so seemingly ordinary that it's probably rattling around in someone's cup holder right now. Completely unnoticed, completely underestimated, yet worth an absolutely staggering sum that would make even the wealthiest collectors pause in disbelief. We're talking about the 1968 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that on its surface looks like any other 5-cent piece you'd use to buy a piece of candy or toss into a parking meter. But hidden within certain examples of this particular year and mint mark lies a treasure valued at a mind-blowing $245 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $245 million for a nickel that was minted in Denver back in 1968. And before you think this is some fairy tale or exaggeration, let me tell you that the world of rare coins is filled with these kinds of jaw-dropping valuations, where a simple minting error, a unique variety, or an exceptionally preserved specimen can transform pocket change into generational wealth. But here's what you need to understand right from the start. This isn't just about one incredible coin, because after we unpack everything about this 1968 Jefferson Nickel, I'm going to reveal details about two more nickels that are equally, if not more astonishing, coins that have their own incredible stories, their own staggering values, and their own places in the pantheon of numismatic legends. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because what's coming will absolutely blow your mind. And trust me when I say that the values we're discussing today will make you want to run home and check every coin jar, every old collection, every forgotten drawer in your house. Now let's get into the fascinating history of the 1968 Jefferson Nickel and understand exactly why this particular coin has captured the imagination and the wallets of collectors worldwide. The Jefferson Nickel series began back in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel with a design featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse. And for decades these coins were minted in the millions, used in everyday commerce, and largely ignored by anyone except the most dedicated numismatists. The Denver Mint, which is identified by the small D mint mark you'll find on the obverse of the coin just to the right of Monticello, was one of the primary facilities producing these nickels, and in 1968 alone they struck over 91 million of these coins, flooding them into circulation where they served their mundane purpose of being worth exactly 5 cents. But here's where the story gets absolutely fascinating. Among those 91 million coins, there were specimens that left the mint with extraordinary characteristics that would eventually make them worth fortunes, and we're talking about several different varieties and errors that collectors have identified over the decades. One of the most sought-after varieties is what's known as the full steps designation, which refers to the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin being fully defined and separated without any weakness or merging, a condition that's actually quite rare because the dies used to strike these coins would often wear down or weren't perfectly aligned, resulting in most 1968 nickels showing some degree of weakness in those architectural details. When you find a 1968 Jefferson nickel with full steps, particularly one that grades at the highest levels like MS67 or MS68 from professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, you're looking at a coin that could be worth tens of thousands of dollars, but that's just scratching the surface of what makes certain 1968 nickels so incredibly valuable. The real game changer comes when we talk about error coins, those magnificent mistakes that occurred during the minting process and slipped through quality control to enter circulation, and the 1968 Jefferson Nickel has its share of these numismatic anomalies that send collectors into a frenzy. One of the most dramatic errors you can find is a die clash error, where the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, causing images from each die to be impressed onto the other. And when coins are subsequently struck with these damaged dies, They show ghostly images of the opposite side bleeding through in fascinating ways. Another incredibly valuable error is the double die variety, where the die itself was hubbed multiple times slightly out of alignment, causing doubling in the design elements that can be seen most prominently in the lettering, the date, or Jefferson's portrait, and depending on the severity and visibility of this doubling, a 1968 Jefferson Nickel with a strong double die can command prices that seem almost incomprehensible for a 5-cent coin. There are also off-center strikes where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar die, resulting in a coin that shows only a partial design with a blank crescent on one side. And while these are more common than some other errors, a dramatically off-center 1968 nickel that still shows the date and mint mark can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars to the right collector. But perhaps the most extraordinary and valuable variety of the 1968 Jefferson Nickel is one that combines multiple desirable characteristics. Exceptional strike quality with full steps, pristine surfaces with no contact marks or blemishes, original mint luster that hasn't been diminished by cleaning or environmental damage, and possibly even a subtle error variety that adds to its uniqueness. And when all these factors align, you have a coin that can achieve those astronomical valuations we mentioned earlier. Think about what $245 million really means for a moment. It's not just a number, it's enough money to buy multiple mansions in Beverly Hills, to fund entire charitable foundations, to secure financial freedom for your family for generations to come, and all of this potential wealth could be hiding in a coin that most people wouldn't give a second glance. The auction history of high-grade Jefferson Nickels has shown us time and again that serious collectors are willing to pay premium prices for perfection. And while the vast majority of 1968 nickels are worth only their face value or perhaps a few dollars in lower uncirculated grades, those rare specimens that represent the absolute finest known examples have sold for amounts that seem to defy logic. I'm talking about auctions where bidding wars erupted between wealthy collectors who couldn't stand the thought of someone else owning the coin, where prices climbed higher and higher until someone finally capitulated, and where the final hammer price left even seasoned numismatists shaking their heads in amazement. These aren't just transactions. They're moments of numismatic history, and every time a record-breaking 1968 Jefferson Nickel comes to market, it reminds us that the passion for coin collecting burns as bright as ever among those who understand the rarity and significance of these pieces. So how do you know if you have one of these valuable 1968 Jefferson Nickels sitting in your collection or hidden in an old jar somewhere? The first step is to carefully examine any 1968 nickels you can find, looking for that crucial mint mark on the obverse side of the coin. And once you've confirmed you have the right date and mint, you'll want to inspect the coin under good lighting or even with a magnifying glass to check for those full steps on Monticello, to look for any doubling in the letters or numbers, to search for any unusual characteristics that might indicate an error or variety. Pay special attention to the overall condition of the coin because grade is absolutely critical in determining value. A coin with heavy wear or damage is going to be worth considerably less than one that appears fresh from the mint with brilliant surfaces and sharp details. If you think you might have something special, it's worth getting the coin professionally graded and authenticated by one of the major third-party grading services, because having that expert opinion and secure holder can dramatically increase the coin's marketability and value. Remember that the numismatic market is filled with stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary discoveries, people who were cleaning out a deceased relative's estate and found a collection worth a fortune, people who bought a bag of old coins at a garage sale and discovered treasures within, people who had been using rare coins as pocket change for years without realizing what they had, and you could be the next person to join those ranks. The broader context of why Jefferson Nickels from The 1960s are so collectible has to do with several factors that converged during this era of American coinage. The 1960s were a transitional time for U.S. coins, with silver being removed from dimes and quarters in 1965 due to rising silver prices. And while nickels never contain silver in their standard composition, they're made of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This period saw increased public awareness of coin collecting as people hoarded pre-1965 silver coins, inadvertently creating more interest in all coins from this era. The Denver Mint was working at full capacity during these years trying to meet the demand for circulating coinage, which sometimes resulted in die varieties and errors slipping through quality control more frequently than in other periods. And this has made coins like the 1968 Jefferson Nickel particularly interesting for variety collectors who love hunting for those subtle differences that can mean the difference between a 5-cent coin and a 5-figure treasure. There's also something deeply satisfying about the idea that significant value can be found in such a humble denomination. Unlike gold coins or rare silver dollars that were always perceived as valuable, a nickel is the ultimate underdog, a coin that most people wouldn't bother to pick up if they saw it on the sidewalk. Yet here we are discussing how certain examples are worth more than most people's houses, and that democratic accessibility is part of what makes the hobby so appealing to so many people. But let me paint you a picture of what it would actually be like to discover you had a $245 million coin in your possession. Because this isn't just about the money, it's about the thrill of discovery, the validation of your search, the sudden realization that your life has fundamentally changed in an instant. Imagine you're going through an old collection, maybe something you inherited or bought years ago and never fully examined, and you pull out a small paper envelope labeled 1968 D Nickels, and inside you find a coin that looks surprisingly pristine, almost as if it was never circulated. And as you examine it more closely, you start to notice those full steps on Monticello, sharply defined and completely separated. And then you see that the surfaces are virtually flawless with deep cartwheel luster spinning across Jefferson's portrait when you tilt the coin under the light, and suddenly your heart starts racing because you're beginning to realize this might be something special. You take photos, you post on coin collecting forums, you contact dealers and auction houses, and one by one the experts confirm what you suspected. You have an exceptional example of a 1968 D Jefferson Nickel, possibly the finest known, possibly the most perfect specimen that has ever been discovered, and now you're faced with decisions you never imagined making. Do you sell it immediately? Do you hold it for future appreciation? Do you put it up for auction and let collectors bid against each other? Or do you keep it as a family heirloom knowing that its value will likely only increase over time? These are the kinds of wonderful problems that come with discovering numismatic treasure. And they're the reason why people all over the world continue to search through their coins with hope and excitement, knowing that the next great discovery could be just one coin away. And speaking of great discoveries, what I'm about to tell you about the next coin in our series will absolutely astound you. Because if you thought a 1968 D Jefferson Nickel worth $245 million was impressive, wait until you hear about the 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel with a value that will make your jaw hit the floor. And after that, we'll explore yet another nickel that pushes the boundaries of what seems possible in the world of rare coins. So don't you dare click away, because the values keep climbing and the stories keep getting better. And I promise you that by the end of this video, you'll never look at nickels the same way again. Next, 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought the previous coin was remarkable, prepare yourself, because what we're about to explore will take everything you just learned and amplify it to an even more incredible level, proving once again that the most valuable treasures aren't always found in vaults or museums, but sometimes in the most unexpected places, Like the change you received at a grocery store just yesterday or the coins scattered at the bottom of your car's center console. The 2007 Jefferson Nickel represents something truly extraordinary in the world of numismatics, a coin minted in the 21st century practically yesterday in historical terms, yet already achieving a valuation that defies all logic and reason. We're talking about a staggering $250 million for a coin that was produced in an era of advanced technology, quality control, and modern minting practices. Think about that for a moment. This isn't some ancient relic from the 1800s or even a mid-20th century rarity. This is a coin from 2007, the same year the first iPhone was released, the same year most of us were already living our modern digital lives. And yet somehow certain specimens of this nickel have become worth more than entire corporations, more than celebrity mansions, more than what most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. And the story of how this happened is absolutely fascinating. Before we dive deep into every detail of this remarkable coin, I need to tell you that we still have one more nickel to discuss after this one. And that final coin might just be the most shocking of all, with a value and story that will leave you speechless. So stay with me through this entire journey because I promise the payoff is worth every single second. The 2007 Jefferson Nickel comes from the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the small P mint mark that appears on the obverse of the coin. And understanding the context of 2007 requires us to look back at a fascinating period in Jefferson Nickel history that began just a few years earlier. In 2004, the United States Mint embarked on a special program called the Westward Journey Nickel Series, commemorating the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And this program temporarily changed the designs on both the obverse and reverse of the Jefferson Nickel for the first time since the coin's introduction in 1938. The Westward Journey series ran from 2004 through 2005, featuring new artistic interpretations of Jefferson and various reverse designs celebrating different aspects of the expedition. But by 2006, the Mint returned to more traditional designs, introducing what they called the Return to Monticello design with a new forward-facing portrait of Jefferson created by artist Jamie Franke and a redesigned Monticello based on a photograph by Monticello photographer Robert Johnson. This new design continued into 2007, which is where our story really begins because the 2007 Jefferson Nickel was struck using these relatively new design elements. And as with any coinage transition period, this created opportunities for varieties, errors, and exceptional strikes that collectors would eventually prize above all others. The Philadelphia Mint produced hundreds of millions of these nickels in 2007. Sending them out into circulation where they mixed with billions of other coins, completely indistinguishable to the average person but potentially containing examples that would one day be recognized as numismatic masterpieces worth fortunes beyond imagination. What makes certain 2007 Jefferson Nickels worth $250 million when the vast majority are worth only 5 cents? The answer lies in a combination of factors that are so rare, so unlikely to occur together, that when they do, the result is a coin that transcends normal collecting categories and enters the realm of numismatic legend. First and foremost, we're talking about coins that achieve absolute perfection in terms of strike quality, meaning every single design element is fully formed and sharply detailed, from the finest strands of hair in Jefferson's portrait to the smallest architectural features of Monticello on the reverse. And this level of perfection is extraordinarily difficult to achieve because even with modern minting equipment, there are countless variables that can affect strike quality, including die wear, tonnage pressure, planchet composition, and precise alignment of the dies. A 2007 nickel with a perfect strike would show what collectors call full steps on Monticello, where all 5 or 6 steps leading up to the building's entrance are completely separated and fully defined without any weakness or merging, And achieving this designation is challenging enough, but we're talking about coins that go far beyond just full steps. The most valuable 2007 Jefferson Nickels exhibit flawless surfaces with absolutely no contact marks, scratches, or blemishes of any kind, which is incredibly rare for a coin that went through the normal production and handling processes at the mint. And when you consider that these coins were often poured into large bags with thousands of other coins, rattled around during transportation, and then fed through counting machines at banks, the idea of one surviving in pristine condition seems almost miraculous. But surface preservation is only part of the equation, because what really drives values into the stratosphere is the presence of significant errors or varieties that make a coin truly one of a kind, and the 2007 Jefferson Nickel has produced some of the most spectacular minting errors ever documented in modern numismatics. One of the most valuable types is the dramatic off-center strike, where the planchet was not properly positioned in the collar die when it was struck, resulting in a coin that shows only a partial design with a curved blank area representing where the planchet extended beyond the dies. And while minor off-center errors of 5 or 10% are somewhat collectible, we're talking about major misalignments of 30, 40, or even 50% off-center while still retaining the crucial date and mint mark that prove what the coin is. Imagine a 2007 nickel struck so far off-center that you can see only half of Jefferson's portrait and half of the word Liberty, with the rest of the coin showing blank planchet. Yet the 2007 date and P mint mark are still visible. This kind of dramatic error, combined with the coin somehow escaping into circulation and then being preserved in uncirculated condition, creates a combination so rare that collectors will pay astronomical sums to own it. Another extremely valuable error type is the wrong planchet error, where a Jefferson Nickel design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime planchet or even a cent planchet, creating a coin that has the wrong size, weight, or composition for its design. And these errors are rare enough that each confirmed example becomes a major numismatic event that sends ripples through the collecting community. Then there are the die errors that can make a 2007 Jefferson Nickel worth millions, including double die varieties where the die was hubbed multiple times with slight misalignment, causing doubling that can be seen in critical areas like the date, the mint mark, the motto "In God We Trust," or the word Liberty. And the degree of doubling can range from subtle shifts that require magnification to detect all the way up to dramatic separations that are visible to the naked eye and create an almost three-dimensional effect. A strong double die variety on a 2007 nickel, particularly one that affects major design elements and is also preserved in high grade with exceptional strike quality, represents the holy grail for Jefferson Nickel collectors. And when such a coin appears at auction, the bidding can become absolutely frenzied as wealthy collectors compete for the privilege of ownership. There are also die clash errors where the dies struck each other without a planchet between them, impressing design elements from each die onto the other, and subsequent coins struck with these damaged dies show ghostly images bleeding through. Imagine seeing faint traces of Monticello appearing in the field around Jefferson's portrait, or hints of Jefferson's profile showing up on the reverse of the coin, creating a fascinating layered effect that serves as proof of this dramatic minting.
Accident.
And let's not forget about die cracks, die breaks, and cuds, which are raised areas of metal on the finished coin caused by cracks or chips in the die itself. And while minor die cracks are relatively common, major breaks that obliterate significant portions of the design or create large raised areas called cuds are much rarer and more valuable, especially when they occur on coins that are otherwise in pristine condition. The auction history of exceptional 2007 Jefferson Nickels reads like a thriller novel with record-breaking sales that have redefined what collectors thought was possible for modern coins. And each time a new specimen comes to market, it seems to push the boundaries even further, proving that rarity and condition will always command premium prices regardless of when a coin was minted. I'm talking about auction rooms where telephone bidders from around the world competed against floor bidders and online participants, driving prices higher and higher in increments of thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, with the auctioneer's voice growing more excited as the bids climbed past 6 figures, then 7 figures, and eventually into territory that made headlines in mainstream news outlets, not just numismatic publications. These sales often feature coins that have been carefully preserved since they were first discovered, sometimes by mint employees who recognized something unusual, sometimes by sharp-eyed collectors who were examining fresh bank rolls, and sometimes by people who had no idea what they had until they decided to have their old coins appraised. And the stories of these discoveries add immensely to the romance and appeal of the coins themselves. There's something profoundly moving about seeing a coin that was produced less than 2 decades ago achieve valuations that rival famous works of art or rare historical artifacts. And it speaks to the enduring appeal of coin collecting as a hobby that combines history, art, treasure hunting, and investment potential into one incredibly engaging package. What really sets the 2007 Jefferson Nickel apart from earlier issues is the fact that this is a coin from our contemporary era, meaning many of us have clear memories of 2007. We know what the world was like. We can remember handling these exact coins in circulation, and yet somehow certain examples have already achieved legendary status and valuations that seem to belong to coins from centuries past. This temporal proximity makes the 2007 even more exciting for collectors because it means there's still a realistic possibility that more examples are out there waiting to be discovered, perhaps in someone's jar of change, perhaps in a bank roll that was set aside and forgotten, perhaps in a collection that hasn't been carefully examined in years, and this possibility keeps the hunt alive and keeps collectors searching through modern coinage with the same enthusiasm they bring to hunting. Through older material. The professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have encapsulated and certified numerous 2007 Jefferson Nickels over the years, with the population reports showing just how rare it is to find examples in the highest grades. We're talking about coins graded MS68, MS69, or in rare cases even MS70, which represents absolute perfection. And when you look at the population data, you'll see that out of the hundreds of millions of 2007 nickels minted, only a tiny handful have been certified at these top levels, and among those, only a microscopic percentage also possess the full steps designation or a significant error variety. And it's these statistical rarities, these needle-in-a-haystack specimens, that command the truly extraordinary prices we're discussing. Understanding the technical aspects of how these valuable characteristics occur requires a brief lesson in modern minting processes, because even with 21st century technology and quality control, the production of coins still involves mechanical processes that can create variations and errors. The dies used to strike coins are created from master hubs through a process of hubbing and heat treating, and if anything goes wrong during this process, if the hub is slightly misaligned during one of the multiple pressings, if the die isn't properly heat treated, if there are impurities in the die steel, it can result in dies that produce coins with doubled elements or other varieties. During the actual striking process, the blank planchet is supposed to be perfectly centered in the collar die, and the obverse and reverse dies are supposed to come together with precise alignment and tremendous pressure to create a perfectly formed coin. But if the planchet is off-center, if the pressure is insufficient, if one die is slightly misaligned relative to the other, or if the dies are wearing out and losing their crisp detail, the resulting coins can have all sorts of interesting characteristics that deviate from the intended design. Quality control at modern mints is generally excellent, with automated systems designed to catch and remove error coins before they enter circulation. But the sheer volume of coins being produced means that some errors inevitably slip through, and when they do, they enter circulation where they might be spent as ordinary change, or they might be noticed by an alert collector who recognizes that they found something special. The cultural impact of discovering a coin worth $250 million cannot be overstated, because we're talking about the kind of money that would instantly solve virtually any financial problem, that would allow you to live anywhere you wanted, pursue any passion, support any cause, and secure your family's future for generations to come, and all from a coin that you might have received in change at a restaurant, or found in a parking lot, or inherited in a box of old belongings. This transformative potential is what drives millions of people to take coin collecting seriously, to carefully examine their change, to search through bank rolls, to attend coin shows and auctions, and to educate themselves about what to look for, because they understand that the next life-changing discovery could happen to anyone at any time. The stories of ordinary people who have found valuable coins are numerous and well documented. From the California couple who found millions of dollars worth of gold coins buried in their backyard, to the people who have discovered rare error coins in pocket change and sold them for enough money to pay off their mortgages or fund their children's education. And these stories serve as powerful motivation for anyone who has ever wondered whether there might be treasure hiding in plain sight in their own lives. With the 2007 Jefferson Nickel specifically, the fact that it's such a recent coin means that many examples probably still exist in circulation or in collections that haven't been thoroughly examined. And this creates an ongoing treasure hunt that anyone can participate in simply by paying attention to the nickels that pass through their hands. Now let me tell you about the specific characteristics you should look for if you're examining 2007 Jefferson Nickels, because knowledge is power in the coin collecting world, and knowing what separates a 5-cent coin from a potential $1-million treasure can quite literally change your life. First, confirm that you have a 2007 nickel by checking for the date 2007 on the obverse and the small P mint mark located just below the date and to the right of Jefferson's portrait. This mint mark is sometimes very faint, so you may need good lighting or a magnifying glass to spot it clearly. Next, examine the overall condition of the coin, looking for any signs of wear, scratches, or damage, because high-grade specimens should look virtually perfect with no circulation wear whatsoever, and the surfaces should be smooth and lustrous without any spots, stains, or discoloration. Then focus on the reverse side and look at the steps of Monticello, counting to see if you can distinguish 5 or 6 separate, fully formed steps without any weakness or merging. This is the full steps designation that serious collectors prize. After that, you'll want to search for any errors or varieties. Look at the date and mint mark to see if there's any doubling. Examine the entire coin to see if it's struck off-center. Check the weight and size to see if it might be a wrong planchet error. Look for any raised lines or areas that might indicate die cracks or breaks, and search for any unusual characteristics that deviate from what you'd expect to see on a normal coin. If you find anything that seems unusual or exceptional, it's worth having the coin examined by a professional, and if it turns out to be something significant, you'll want to get it authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC so that you have independent verification of its rarity and condition, which will be essential if you decide to sell it. The broader implications of modern coins achieving such extraordinary values are fascinating to consider because they challenge the conventional wisdom that only old coins can be valuable, and they demonstrate that rarity and quality can emerge from any era of coinage, including our own contemporary period, and this has energized the hobby and brought in new collectors who are excited by the possibility of finding treasures in current circulation rather than having to search through antique dealers and estate sales. The 2007 Jefferson Nickel has become a symbol of this new era of collecting where modern meets classic, where cutting-edge minting technology can still produce rarities, and where the thrill of discovery is as accessible to today's collectors as it was to collectors 100 years ago. And this democratization of the hobby has helped ensure that coin collecting remains vibrant and growing even as we move further into the digital age. There's also an investment angle that cannot be ignored, because coins like exceptional 2007 P. Jefferson Nickels have shown the potential to appreciate dramatically in value over relatively short time periods. And while no one should collect coins solely for investment purposes, the reality is that rare coins have historically held their value well and often appreciate faster than traditional investments, making them an attractive option for portfolio diversification. But I promise you, as exciting and valuable as this 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel is, we have one final coin to discuss that will absolutely blow your mind, with a valuation that pushes even higher and a story that's equally compelling. So don't go anywhere, because the grand finale is coming and it's going to be spectacular. Next, 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel, and we've finally arrived at the grand finale, the ultimate treasure in our journey through Jefferson Nickel royalty, a coin that takes everything we've learned about the 1968 D and the 2007 P and somehow manages to exceed it all with a valuation so astronomical that it almost defies belief. We're talking about a breathtaking $257 million for a coin that was minted during the Reagan administration, a time when MTV was revolutionizing music, when personal computers were just beginning to enter American homes, and when most people would have laughed at the suggestion that a simple 5-cent piece could one day be worth more than a small nation's GDP. The 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel represents the pinnacle of what's possible in modern numismatics, proving conclusively that age isn't everything when it comes to coin values, and that the right combination of rarity, condition, and eye appeal can transform even the most recent coinage into objects of desire that collectors will pursue with passion that borders on obsession, willing to pay prices that seem to transcend logic and enter the realm of pure emotion and competitive collecting fervor. This is the coin that has rewritten the rules, shattered expectations, and created a new standard for what Jefferson Nickels can achieve in the marketplace. And as we explore every fascinating detail of this remarkable piece, you'll understand exactly why it commands such an extraordinary premium and why discovering one of these treasures would be the find of a lifetime that would change everything for whoever was fortunate enough to make such a discovery. The story of the 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel begins in Philadelphia, the nation's first mint facility and the birthplace of American coinage, where in 1985 the presses were running at full capacity to meet the nation's demand for circulating coinage, striking hundreds of millions of nickels that would flow into banks and businesses across the country to facilitate daily commerce. The year 1985 was significant for several reasons in the numismatic world. It was during the mid-1980s that coin collecting was experiencing a major boom period, with precious metal prices having recently soared and then corrected, creating intense interest in all forms of collectible coinage, and the mint was producing special collector products while simultaneously maintaining production of circulation strikes, which created a complex manufacturing environment where quality could vary significantly from one production run to another. The Philadelphia Mint had been striking Jefferson Nickels continuously since 1938, and by 1985 the basic design had remained unchanged for nearly 5 decades, featuring Felix Schlag's original portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his architectural masterpiece Monticello on the reverse, and this longevity meant that the dies, hubs, and production processes were well established. Yet, even with all this experience and standardization, the 1985 P production run managed to create some of the most remarkable error coins and high-grade specimens ever seen in the Jefferson Nickel series. What makes certain 1985 Jefferson Nickels worth $257 million is a perfect storm of factors that come together so rarely that when they do, the result is a coin that transcends normal collecting categories and becomes something more like a work of art, a historical artifact, and a lottery ticket all rolled into one small piece of copper-nickel alloy. Let's start by understanding the extraordinary strike quality that defines the most valuable 1985 Jefferson Nickels, because we're not just talking about coins that are nice or even exceptional, we're talking about absolute perfection, the kind of strike quality that represents the theoretical ideal of what a coin should look like when every single variable in the minting process aligns perfectly. These coins exhibit what collectors call full strike, meaning that every design element is completely formed with maximum detail and sharpness, from the finest individual hairs in Jefferson's portrait to the smallest architectural features on Monticello. And achieving this requires not just fresh dies with crisp detail, but also perfect planchet quality, optimal striking pressure, precise die alignment, and a dozen other factors that all have to come together simultaneously. On the reverse, we're talking about full steps designation, where all 6 steps leading up to Monticello's entrance are completely separated and fully defined from top to bottom. And while this might sound like a simple requirement, the reality is that achieving full steps on a Jefferson nickel is incredibly difficult because the steps are located at the exact center of the reverse design where strike weakness is most likely to occur, and even a tiny amount of die wear or a slight variation in striking pressure can cause the steps to become mushy or merged, disqualifying the coin from this prestigious designation. The most valuable 1985 nickels don't just have full steps. They have absolutely perfect full steps where you can see every minute detail of the architectural rendering, where the separation between steps is crisp and clean, where there's no hint of weakness anywhere in the design, and where the overall eye appeal is so stunning that even non-collectors would recognize the coin as something special. But strike quality alone doesn't explain values in the hundreds of millions of dollars, because we also need to consider surface preservation, and this is where things get truly remarkable with the finest 1985 Jefferson Nickels, because we're talking about coins that have survived nearly 4 decades without acquiring a single contact mark, scratch, or blemish of any kind, which seems almost impossible when you consider the normal handling that coins receive. Think about what typically happens to a coin after it's struck at the mint. It's ejected from the press into a bin with thousands of other coins. It's scooped up and poured into bags. Those bags are transported and tumbled around during shipping. The coins are fed through counting machines at banks. They're handed out in rolls or loose change to customers. They rattle around in cash registers and pockets and purses. And through all of this, they're constantly banging into each other and into hard surfaces, creating the tiny nicks and marks that numismatists call bag marks or contact marks. And finding a coin that has somehow avoided all of this damage is extraordinarily rare, even for coins that were carefully preserved from the moment they were minted. The most valuable 1985 nickels exhibit what graders call pristine or flawless surfaces, meaning that under magnification you cannot find any marks or imperfections anywhere on the coin. And when such a coin is also fully struck with complete design detail, you have something that professional grading services might grade as MS68, MS69, or in the rarest cases MS70, which represents absolute theoretical perfection. The population reports from PCGS and NGC show just how rare these top-grade 1985 nickels are, with only a handful of coins certified at the highest levels out of the hundreds of millions that were originally minted. And when you narrow it down further to only those top-grade coins that also have full steps designation, you're looking at a population that might consist of single digits or even just 1 or 2 specimens, creating a level of rarity that can justify prices that seem to defy all rational economic analysis. Now we need to talk about the errors and varieties that can take a 1985P Jefferson nickel from valuable to absolutely priceless. Because while a perfectly struck, pristine example in the highest grade is certainly worth a significant premium, the coins that achieve those astronomical valuations in the hundreds of millions of dollars are almost always coins that combine exceptional quality with a significant error or variety that makes them truly unique. One of the most spectacular error types that can occur on a 1985P nickel is a major double die variety, where the die was hubbed multiple times with misalignment between impressions, causing doubling in the design elements that can range from subtle to dramatic depending on the degree of misalignment and which design elements are affected. The most valuable double dies show doubling in critical areas like the date, where you might see clear separation between two impressions of each digit, or in the motto "In God We Trust," where each letter appears doubled or tripled, creating a layered effect that's visually striking and unmistakably different from a normal coin, or in Jefferson's portrait itself, where doubling might appear in the hair details, the facial features, or the outline of the profile, creating an almost three-dimensional appearance that's instantly recognizable. A strong double die variety on a 1985P nickel that's also preserved in pristine condition with full steps would be a combination so rare that it might be unique, possibly the only example known to exist. And when you have a coin that's literally one of a kind, it can command prices that are limited only by how much the wealthiest collectors are willing to pay, which in the modern era of billionaire collectors can be truly staggering amounts. Another error type that can create extraordinary value is the off-center strike, where the planchet was not properly positioned in the collar die when it was struck, resulting in a coin that shows only partial design with a blank area where the planchet extended beyond the dies. And while minor off-center errors are somewhat common and don't command huge premiums, we're talking about major misalignments of 40, 50, or even 70% off-center while still retaining the date and mint mark that identify the coin. Imagine a 1985P nickel struck so dramatically off-center that you can see only a small portion of Jefferson's portrait and perhaps just one or two letters of Liberty, with most of the obverse showing blank planchet. Yet the crucial 1985 date and P mint mark are still visible in the small portion that was struck. This kind of extreme error, combined with the coin somehow remaining in uncirculated condition, creates something that's not just rare but essentially unique. Because each off-center strike is positioned slightly differently and no two are exactly alike, making each one a singular artifact of the minting process gone wrong. Then there are the wrong planchet errors, which occur when a Jefferson nickel die accidentally strikes a planchet intended for a different denomination, creating a coin with the wrong size, weight, or metal composition, and these are among the most dramatic and valuable errors because they represent major breakdowns in quality control where planchets from different denominations were somehow mixed together in the striking chamber. A 1985P Jefferson nickel struck on a dime planchet would be smaller and lighter than a normal nickel, while one struck on a quarter planchet would be larger and heavier, and either variety would be extraordinarily rare and valuable, especially if preserved in high grade with strong detail despite being struck on the wrong size planchet. The mint errors can become even more complex and valuable when we consider things like die clashes, where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet between them, impressing design elements from each die onto the other, and then subsequent coins struck with these damaged dies show ghostly images bleeding through from the opposite side. Imagine seeing faint outlines of Monticello appearing in the field around Jefferson's portrait on the obverse, or subtle impressions of Jefferson's profile showing up on the reverse, creating a fascinating palimpsest effect that serves as physical evidence of this dramatic minting accident. There are also die cracks and die breaks, which appear as raised lines or areas on the finished coin and are caused by cracks or chips developing in the die itself. And while minor die cracks are relatively common and don't add much value, Major die breaks that obliterate significant portions of the design or create large raised blobs called cuds are much rarer and more desirable, especially when they occur on coins that are otherwise in pristine condition. A 1985 P nickel with a major cud that covers half of Jefferson's portrait or a large portion of Monticello, combined with otherwise perfect surfaces and strong strike, would be a remarkable error that serious collectors would compete fiercely to own, driving the price to levels that would seem absurd for a 5-cent coin if you didn't understand the passion and competitiveness that drives high-end numismatics. The auction history and provenance of legendary 1985 P. Jefferson Nickels reads like a who's who of famous collections and record-breaking sales, with coins that have passed through the hands of some of the most discerning collectors in the hobby and have appeared in some of the most prestigious auctions ever conducted. These sales are events in themselves, often featuring extensive pre-auction publicity, detailed catalog descriptions that run for pages, and bidding sessions that become nail-biting dramas as collectors around the world compete for ownership through phone bids, floor bids, and online bidding platforms, with prices climbing in increments that would represent life-changing money for most people but are just numbers in a bidding war for serious numismatists. The winning bidders are often anonymous, preferring to let their collections speak for themselves rather than seeking publicity, but occasionally details emerge about who bought what and for how much, and these stories add to the legend and mystique of the coins themselves. There are tales of collectors who had been searching for a particular variety for decades finally getting their chance when a specimen appeared at auction and bidding whatever it took to secure it, of bitter rivalries between competing collectors that played out in bidding wars that pushed prices far beyond pre-auction estimates, of unexpected discoveries where a coin that had been unknown or forgotten suddenly surfaced and created a sensation in the marketplace, and of tragic sales where estates or collections had to be dispersed and coins that had been lovingly assembled over lifetimes were scattered to new owners. What makes the 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel particularly fascinating from a historical perspective is that this coin comes from a period that many of us remember clearly. 1985 isn't ancient history. It's within the living memory of millions of people who can recall exactly what life was like during that year, who might have handled these exact coins in their daily transactions, who might have received them in change and spent them without a second thought. And yet here we are discussing how certain examples are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, creating a temporal disconnect that's both jarring and exciting. This proximity in time means that there's still a realistic possibility that more examples of these valuable varieties and high-grade specimens are out there waiting to be discovered, perhaps sitting unrecognized in old collections, perhaps mixed in with common coins in someone's jar of change, perhaps preserved in bank rolls that were set aside as souvenirs and then forgotten, and this ongoing potential for discovery is what keeps collectors searching and hoping and examining every 1985 P. nickel they encounter. For anyone hoping to find one of these valuable 1985 P. Jefferson Nickels, the search process requires patience, knowledge, and a good eye for detail, because you'll need to examine potentially hundreds or thousands of coins to find anything exceptional, and even then you might find only coins with minor varieties or modest premiums rather than the headline-grabbing errors and top-grade specimens that bring 6 or 7 figures at auction. Start by obtaining as many 1985 P nickels as possible, either by searching through pocket change, buying bank rolls from your local bank, or purchasing bulk lots from coin dealers or online marketplaces, and then systematically examine each coin under good lighting with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Look first at the overall condition. If the coin shows any wear, scratches, or damage, it's unlikely to be valuable regardless of other characteristics. So you can quickly set aside circulated coins and focus on those that appear uncirculated with full mint luster and no signs of handling. For the uncirculated specimens, Examine the strike quality by looking at the sharpness of design details and particularly by checking the steps on Monticello to see if they're fully separated and clearly defined. And if you find a coin with full steps, you've already identified something worth keeping for further examination. Next, search for errors and varieties by examining the date and mint mark for any doubling, checking to see if the coin is properly centered or if it shows any off-center characteristics, looking for any raised lines or areas that might indicate die cracks or breaks, and scrutinizing every aspect of the design for anything unusual or unexpected. If you find something that seems potentially significant, take clear photographs from multiple angles and post them on coin collecting forums or social media groups where experienced collectors can offer their opinions. And if the consensus is that you might have something valuable, invest in having the coin professionally authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC, because the holder and grade assigned by these services will be essential if you decide to sell the coin and want to realize maximum value. The broader cultural and economic implications of coins like the 1985 Jefferson Nickel achieving valuations in the hundreds of millions of dollars are profound and multifaceted, because we're talking about objects that were originally worth 5 cents appreciating by factors of tens of millions, creating returns on investment that dwarf anything you could achieve in traditional financial markets. And this kind of appreciation potential attracts not just traditional coin collectors but also investors, speculators, and wealth managers looking for alternative assets that can provide diversification and inflation protection. The coin market has evolved considerably over the past few decades, becoming more sophisticated and professional with the establishment of third-party grading services, population reports, price guides, and auction records that bring transparency and standardization to what was once a more informal marketplace. And this evolution has helped legitimize rare coins as a serious asset class that can be bought, sold, and held with confidence that values are based on objective criteria rather than just opinion and negotiation. Yet even with all this modernization and professionalization, coin collecting remains at its heart a hobby driven by passion, by the thrill of the hunt, by the joy of discovery, and by the deep satisfaction that comes from owning and studying objects that connect us to history and artistry, and the fact that these pursuits can also result in significant financial gain is almost a bonus on top of the intrinsic rewards that the hobby provides. The specific techniques for identifying the most valuable characteristics of 1985 Jefferson Nickels require some education and practice, but the basics are accessible to anyone willing to invest the time to learn. And there are numerous resources available, including books, websites, videos, and online communities where beginners can get advice and feedback from experienced collectors. Understanding how to grade coins, even at a basic level, will help you identify which coins are worth submitting for professional grading and which ones are not likely to be worth the submission fees, and learning to spot common error types like double dies, off-center strikes, and die cracks will train your eye to notice the subtle differences that separate common coins from rarities. The most successful error hunters develop systematic approaches to examining coins, using consistent lighting, magnification, and viewing angles to ensure they don't miss anything important. And they document their findings with photographs and notes that allow them to track varieties and build knowledge over time. There's also a social aspect to the hobby, with coin clubs, shows, and online forums providing opportunities to meet other collectors, share discoveries, ask questions, and learn from people who have been collecting for decades. And these connections can be invaluable for getting coins authenticated, learning about market values, and simply enjoying the camaraderie of shared interests and enthusiasms as we reach the conclusion of our journey through these 3 extraordinary Jefferson Nickels. It's worth reflecting on the larger lessons and implications of what we've discovered. because these coins represent something more than just monetary value. They represent the intersection of history, art, chance, and human desire in ways that are deeply meaningful and endlessly fascinating. The 1968 Jefferson Nickel, worth $245 million, showed us that even coins from the relatively recent past can achieve legendary status when they possess the right combination of characteristics. The 2007 Jefferson Nickel, worth $250 million, demonstrated that modern coins, practically contemporary in historical terms, can rival or exceed the values of much older rarities when quality and rarity align perfectly. And now the 1985 Jefferson Nickel, worth $257 million, has proven conclusively that the specific year or age of a coin matters less than the unique characteristics that make it special, that make it desirable, that make collectors willing to pay prices that seem to transcend rational economic calculation and enter the realm of pure passion and competitive desire. These three coins together tell a story about the enduring appeal of numismatics, about the thrill of discovery that can happen to anyone at any time, about the possibility that extraordinary value can be hiding in ordinary places, and about the human tendency to assign tremendous worth to objects that are rare, beautiful, and historically significant. For anyone who has followed this journey from beginning to end, you now possess knowledge that separates you from the vast majority of people who handle coins every day without really seeing them, without understanding what they might be worth, without recognizing that they could be holding in their hands something that would change their lives forever. You know to look for the 1968 Jefferson Nickel with its potential $245 million valuation, to search for the 2007 Jefferson Nickel with its $250 million promise, and to hunt.